Hey, what's up guys? My name is Cameron Gallagher, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about the new iMac from Apple, and also to kind of talk about some computer specs when it comes to video editing and buying a video editing machine. Now, I'm going to talk more about sort of planning how to buy a video editing machine, and specifically talking about these new iMacs and why I really like them. So, of course, when it comes to buying an editing machine, there's a lot of different information out on the web, and I think a lot of it can be contradicting and confusing because there's a lot of, terms thrown out there like CPU and GPU and RAM and VRAM and SSD and storage and all this kind of stuff, and I think it becomes confusing for people who are not tech savvy as to what to buy when it comes to a video editing machine. So, I'm going to break it down to you first. If you are someone who's looking for a video editing machine and you don't know what you're looking for, the biggest things in order are your CPU, your RAM, your storage, and then your GPU. Now, people might say, well, no, your GPU is super important because nowadays GPU acceleration, and yes, that's totally true. When it comes to video editing, you have to have all of these things in good order. You have to have a good CPU, good RAM, a lot of RAM, or at least a decent amount of RAM, a fast storage, large storage solution, and a good GPU. You have to have all of those, and unfortunately, that's the reality of it. The thing is you begin to learn where can you cut corners. So, for instance, maybe when it comes to video editing, you should never get anything less than an i7 quad-core processor. I would never recommend getting anything less than a quad-core i7 processor. When it comes to video editing, you should never get less than 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now, is it possible to edit some video with a quad-core i5 or a dual-core i5 and maybe 8 gigs of RAM? It's possible, but it's going to be next to impossible. So, quad-core i7, 16 gigs of RAM, or an AMD quad-core CPU. 16 gigs of RAM, and you're generally going to want a 2 gigabyte graphics card or bigger, and generally speaking, you're going to want a hard drive that runs at about 200 megabytes per second or more. Now, that could be an SSD, that could be a RAID. Either way, those are kind of the things to look at when it comes to buying a computer. Quad-core, i7, 16 gigs of RAM or more, a 200 megabytes or more video, storage device, whether it be an SSD, external, internal, or RAID, or whatever you want, and then a 2 gigabyte graphics card. That'll pretty much get you going on most basic things. But I wanted today to talk about the new iMacs because of, I think these are a really incredible machine at a much cheaper price than people think. And I'm going to explain why in a minute. So I think one of the things that when you think of Mac, you immediately think of, I'm going to click on it, the big old iMac Pro or the Mac Pro, and how it's crazy expensive, and that's true. I mean, if you go to the iMac Pro, so I'm uploading stuff in the background, that's why it's kind of slow. The iMac Pros are like starting at $5,000, and people are like, what? Like $5,000? Like, that's crazy, and you're spending all this money, and it's totally true. Wow, it is really slow. But let's not forget that you're getting a massive 8-core processor, 8 gigs of video card storage, 32 gigs of RAM. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. These new iMacs, though, really set themselves apart in between, and there's something that I believe that I'm going to actually purchase myself. And the specific reason being is, I'm going to go to the 27-inch model. I'm going to show you the version that I'm going to get and why I like this. So right now I have a MacBook Pro that has a quad-core i7, 16 gigs of RAM, so just about right what we're talking about, and 2 gigabyte graphics card. Now I have an external graphics card, which is an 8 gigabyte graphics card. So with the combination, I have 10 gigabytes of graphics power for quad-core i7, 16 gigs of RAM, and I run off a RAID, so and an SSD. So anyway. The problem is that I've noticed, especially working with like GH5 footage, which is compressed H.264, or working with like other compressed file codecs, even uncompressed, having more RAM and a better CPU is going to be such a huge boost for me. So I wanted to show you guys this awesome configuration and how you can really get a monster machine for incredibly cheap. So the first one I'm going to actually show you is just the 6-core version. So if you were to get a 6-core version, and we're going to talk about the memory in a minute, and leave all of your stuff the same. Now, the Fusion drive isn't bad. I'd recommend spending the extra $100 to go to the 512 SSD, but we're going to talk about, just for right now, the Fusion drive. For $2,200, let's think about this. You get a 5K 27-inch monitor, right? Let's be real. Any 5K monitor these displays are absolutely ridiculously nice. Any 5K display right now that you can get on the market is at least probably $900,000, maybe even like $1,100, but even at $900. So you're getting a 5K display, a beautiful 5K display, a 6-core. Now, granted, this is an i5, but this is a 6-core, so it's a little bit different of a ballpark here. A 6-core processor. Now, you're only getting 8 gigabytes of RAM. We'll talk about that in a second, and an 8 gigabyte graphics card. Now, that's pretty incredible. But let's talk about the machine that I'm going to do, and that is the 8-core i9. We're going to talk about this memory in a second here still, and still with that 8 gigabyte of DDR5 graphics card, and then we're going to do the 512 storage. Now, you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, didn't you just tell me that we needed at least 16 gigabytes of RAM? And I did. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to buy, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to be buying RAM from a third-party source. So in my case, I'm going to get it from Newegg, and this is not something that voids the warranty. Actually, on Apple's website, they show you how to replace the RAM, and I'll kind of show you. I don't know if you'll get a great look at it. Right underneath here, so it's right underneath here, there's actually a little spot where you can pop it open and change the RAM, and it's incredibly simple. And what this does is, so to give you an example, I'm wanting 32 gigs of RAM. So in my case, to add this on adds $600 to go from 8 gigabytes to 32 gigabytes. Now here's the awesome part. Right now, a 32 gigabyte kit, 2 16 gigabyte sticks that can fit in this iMac, and again, do not void the warranty. They're completely regulated. Like it's not like you're doing some really weird rigging. This 32 gigabyte RAM kit can be installed for $179. So I save not only $400, but I also end up with 8 gigs more of RAM. Because in that case, I'll have the 32 I install and then the 8. So now I will have 40 gigs of RAM, an 8-core i9 processor, and an Radeon 8 gigabyte graphics card. And I also have an 8 gigabyte external graphics card that runs on Thunderbolt 3. And I will be, not tax included, I will be right around the $3,000 mark. Now, that's a lot of money, obviously. That's not something cheap, and that's not something that, if you're just starting out, you want to go jump on and get. But the idea that these machines this kind of starts to blend to me with the iMac Pro, and I start to really question, for my workflow, an 8-core machine with 40 gigs of RAM and 16 gigabytes of graphics. I mean, that's basically an iMac Pro. And, I have a 4K display, so then I'll have a 4K and a 5K display. So for me, it really kind of begs the question of, buying a machine like this for $3,000 is an amazing investment for the amount of power I'm going to get out of my computer and the longevity that's going to do. So again, if you're buying a computer, I think there's a lot of good information out there, but to me, the key thing is CPU is always number one. RAM is always number two. Great solid state, SSD or really fast storage is number three. And then a large graphics card is number four. And again, you have to have really all of these. But I think when it comes to deciding where you can cut corners, you always need to make sure that you are, because let's be real here. I would rather have the 8-core machine with 32 gigs of RAM, and I would rather have a 4 gig graphics card if it meant, needing to save money somewhere. Obviously, they don't have that as an option, but it's just the idea of, I see a lot of people out there going out and buying crazy expensive graphics cards, and they still have 16 gigabytes of RAM and a quad-core CPU. And I understand that it's really nice because graphics cards are a lot cheaper, but it's a lot less performance you're actually going to get for the price you're going to pay. So anyway, guys, I hope this was helpful to you. I'm really excited about these iMac. I'm hoping to get the iMac in. I think they're still technically pre-order. They don't arrive till April anyway. I'm hoping to get one later this year. Not just yet, but but I'm hoping to get that later this year, and I'll kind of talk about how it compares to my MacBook Pro. I'd like to put them head to head, and let me know if you guys want to see any interesting computer tests, or if you're interested in more computer information when it comes to editing, things like that. I'd love to go more in depth. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.